That's a funny story, actually.
Very well.
Yeah,
Bring it on.
It's a very complex unit, but I love it. There's a partially disappearing fraction of a species in a square meter per year.
Oh my God.
It's crazy, this unit. But you don't know what it's going to be in 10 years, how much of that material is going to be recycled. That's why when you do a life cycle assessment for communication purposes, you need to declare what are the system boundaries.
Ilgtspēja, zaļā domāšana, bizness. Jep, tu klausies podkāstu Zaļā ziemeļmeita, un mans vārds ir Maija Āboliņa-Tomsone. Seko podkāstam Spotify un Apple podcasts un nepalaid garām jaunākās epizodes. Šodien es tev vēlos piedāvāt savādāku sarunu. Sarunu angļu valodā. Jo es uzaicināju pie sevis ciemos ekspertu, kurš ir patiesībā no Kolumbijas, bet jau pēdējos 10 gadus laikam dzīvo jau Latvijā un strādā Rīgas Tehniskajā universitātē. Un viņa pētījuma lauks ir produkta dzīves cikla analīze. Tā ir lieta, par ko mēs sākam dzirdēt arī ar vien vairāk un biežāk. Un tagad, kad mēs esam apraduši ar CO2 pēdas aprēķiniem, tad mums tā ir tāda jauna sfēra, kas man vēl jāpaķer klāt, ir produkta dzīves cikla analīze un aprēķins. Un tad mēs ar Fabian Diaz, kurš tikko ir aizstāvējis arī savu disertāciju par produkta dzīves ciklu tieši pārtikas piegādes ķēdē. Mēs tā arī runājam par to, kas tad ir produkta dzīves cikls, kā to aprēķina, vai tas ir viegli, vai tas ir sarežģīti, vai to ir viegli izdarīt pašam, ja ir vajadzīgs konsultants, vai tas ir jādara pilnīgi visiem uzņēmumiem, visiem pakalpojumiem, produktiem, kādi ir galvenie izaicinājumi. Respektīvi tāda gana praktiska saruna, ļoti vērtīga, vismaz man pašai bija ļoti vērtīga, un es ceru, ka arī tev būs ļoti vērtīga. Un es novēlu, lai tev ir patīkama klausīšanās. Hello, Fabian. It's nice to see you and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Maya. Thank you so much for having me, for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
We will have today a very exciting conversation about a very exciting and interesting topic. But first of all, I would like to ask you, you are LinkedIn top green voice in Europe.
Yeah.
How did you get that? Why did you get that? And what's your purpose? What's your impact that you want to create through this label?
Mm-hmm. That's a funny story, actually.
Very well.
Yeah,
Bring it on.
It happened almost 2 years ago. I had my LinkedIn account for 5 years or something, but I was not really using it. And 2.5 years ago, I decided, you know what? I will start posting some things about the environment. I'm studying. I was doing my PhD in environmental engineering, and I decided to share some articles, some findings, especially regarding food supply chains, regarding recyclability of materials. And I remember I didn't have more than 200 connections, like normal,
2 years ago, yeah?
Yeah, co-workers, stuff like that. Suddenly, one day I'm contacted by email by a certain lady. Hey, Fabian, I work with LinkedIn and I saw that you are lately posting very interesting material regarding environment. Would you like to be part of our content program creator? And I was like, this is weird. This is a weird email. I'm Colombian, so I am very, very skeptical of this type of things.
Okay.
Yeah? And
even more than Latvians?
Yeah, I will think so. Yeah, and I replied like, okay, sure, tell me more. But I was very, very I was not convinced about it. Then, long story short, she invited me to a video call. She explained to me that they wanted to offer me this kind of additional LinkedIn premium package if I was willing to become a green top voice. And my first question is, how much do I have to pay for this? Because this is weird. I mean, why are you coming to me? I have no more than 200 connections, 300. I'm not an influencer, nothing like that. So what is this? She told me, no. It is not about the amount of people that follows you. It's about the content, the quality of the content. And I was like, okay. I mean, if I don't have to pay anything and you are really working on LinkedIn, okay, we will see. You just do whatever you want. 1 week later, I go to my LinkedIn account and I see that I have this premium account now that I was, of course, not paying for it. And I had this top green voice label on my profile. There was a kind of a press release on LinkedIn that a lot of people follow. Suddenly, in 1 week, I went from 200 connections to something like 3,000 people following me.
In 1 week?
In 1 week.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, what is what's going on? I remember contacting her, like asking, okay, this is real, this is happening. What are you really expecting me to do? But no, it's pretty cool. She said, okay, we are not asking for anything else more than please keep posting on a regular basis on the topics that you are already doing. They do not ask for any specific topic. They do not cure what you post. It's just about being active on the platform and engage with others.
So now you have more than 8,000 followers?
Yeah, almost 9,000.
9,000 already. Okay. How do you feel yourself in front of such a big audience? Because you have to be very curious about the message that you are spreading.
Yeah. Sometimes it hits me like I need to be careful what I write. But then I think I'm here because I have always been this honest, and sometimes I'm raw honest, and this has led to very hot conversations on LinkedIn with people who has different views, different opinions, and I really like that because I have learned a lot from many people on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an amazing social network. I have learned so much from chemical engineers, from other LCA practitioners, from scientists. So I love it, and I try to keep myself honest there. I try to put my thoughts as they are. Sometimes they might seem a little bit rough, but that's who I am. I am like that. I do not sugarcoat anything unless I really have to.
Okay, and you also have put in your profile that you stand for true sustainability. What does it mean? What do you mean by true sustainability?
When you talk today about sustainability, most people will immediately think about corporate sustainability. And they will think about ESG. They will think nowadays about corporate sustainability reporting directive or GRI and all these frameworks. These frameworks are important. I'm not saying they are not. But they are not actually measuring sustainability. Sustainability is a quite complex topic because it goes into environmental, it goes into social aspects, and of course also economics. And this is the common knowledge that people have, but sustainability in the last 2 decades as a science has evolved quite fast. And now if you really want to understand if a system is sustainable, you need to understand things like what is the intragenerational equity of a system? And what I mean is, ask anyone about what is sustainability, and they will go immediately and tell you, is fulfilling our needs without compromising the needs of the future generation. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But that is only the intergenerational equity. What about our current state? You cannot have a sustainable planet, a sustainable society when thousands of people are facing hunger, where people is being bombarded, where people is not able to meet their basic needs. That is simply not sustainable. So sustainability as a concept, as a science, has evolved into recognizing all those additional things that most of the time they are not even considered in the typical corporate sustainability definitions. Yeah, that's what I mean with true sustainability. It's way more complex than we think. Sometimes I have been asked, but it is too complex, we cannot measure it. Well, who promises it was going to be easy? Who said that measuring sustainability was going to be easy? No one said that. It's complex. It's going to be complex because it's a complex topic. Yeah. My point is that we need to be very careful when talking about sustainability, and this is something that I fight constantly with many. Not finding that we fight in a good way, explaining. You cannot just say something is sustainable because you use a recycled material or because the carbon footprint is a little bit lower than the benchmark. You need to understand what the war really means, because it's a deep war. It cares about other species even. So that's what I stand for.
Maza reklāmas pauzīte. Vai zini, ko es daru ikdienā? Palīdzu lieliem un maziem uzņēmumiem ar ESG jautājumiem. Mans spēks ir ESG audits un uzņēmuma atbilstības ISRD prasībām, ESG stratēģija un ilgtspējas ziņojumi. Ieskaties ziemeļmed.com un uzzini vairāk, kā varu tev palīdzēt ar ESG jautājumiem. Vai raksti man uzreiz maija@ziemeļmed.com un liekam galvas kopā, kā spēcināt ilgtspēju tavā uzņēmumā. Starp citu, es varu arī būt tavs mentors ilgtspējas tēmā vai vienkārši skats no malas, kas iedos profesionālu vērtējumu par taviem ilgtspējas mērķiem, procesiem, ziņojumu vai komunikāciju. Bet tagad gan atpakaļ pie sarunas.
How did your love story with sustainability started? Who found whom?
It found me in a hard way. I am a chemical engineer. I used to work for the oil and gas sector as a drilling engineer for many, many years in Latin America. So I was doing that, imagine.
I can't imagine.
So yeah, I was working with oil companies. And then I hit a rough patch in 2016. And I decided I needed to change my life. I wanted to change my professional profile. And that's why I came to Latvia to study environmental science.
From the other part of the world.
Yeah,
How did you find Latvia?
Believe it or not, Riga Technical University had some ambassadors in these career days, university encounters, and they were in Bogota in Colombia. And I found the university, I really liked the program. I analyzed versus different options that were in Europe, and I also wanted to experience something really different cultural-wise.
It is really different.
So I remember I had the opportunity to go to Spain, and everyone was like, go to Spain. Is it even in Spanish? You're saying
Exactly.
But I said, no, you know what? I want to experience something completely, really different. I know nothing about Latvia. I want to go there and see what is it about.
And how was it?
Very, very good.
Without any sugarcoating, please.
Without any sugarcoating. I love Latvia. I have been here for now 7 years, and I could not be more grateful to the country and to the people, because the people here has given me the opportunities to study, to work, and now I am doing great. I'm working remotely for an American company, and I decided to stay in Latvia.
And what did you learn in Riga Technical University?
I did a master in environmental science there. And since I was a little bit of a nerd during my master, when I finished, the head of the institute offered me a position as researcher and a scholarship for the PhD.
Wow. It's a good background. It's a very good background, and it's a very good starting point for the very difficult topic that I want to discuss with you today, which is life cycle assessment. Mm-hmm. And actually, the concept of life cycle assessment is coming even more important in the light of Green Claims Directive. Yeah. Which is all about greenwashing, and which one of the core is that you cannot claim any environmental topic without taking into account the full life cycle assessment of the particular topic. Can you please guide us through what does exactly life cycle assessment mean, and what stages does it incorporate in it?
Yeah. To make it very simple, most people is, at least when in the environmental or corporate side, most people is very well aware now of what it means greenhouse gas calculation. Yeah. So scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3. Life cycle assessment somehow is similar, but it incorporates additional environmental impacts like water footprint or acidification potential or toxicity to water. Yeah. So that is the main difference. In life cycle assessment, you do not only focus on carbon footprint, but you take into consideration these other environmental areas of concern.
Resources.
Like resources is one of them, biodiversity, land use. Yeah, those are different impact categories. The impact category changes a little bit depending on the methodology that you use to calculate, but that is a deeper topic. Yeah.
Where is the starting point of life cycle assessment?
Life cycle assessment is divided in 4 steps. Goal and scope definition is the first one, which means I need to understand why I want to do this. What is the purpose of doing this? Is for internal purpose. So I'm a company that wants to improve the environmental performance of my products. So I do a life cycle assessment to understand what is the material or the energy that is causing most of the impact in my production process. And then I work on that and I improve my product. Or is it maybe for communication to stakeholders, to external stakeholders? My client, my customer is asking for the environmental results of my product. Then I need to do a life cycle assessment to give them this material. It can be used for policy making. in many countries in Europe, especially in the UK, governments are funding a life cycle assessment in order to understand what is the environmental impact of different products and then promote those products and communicate to consumers to let them know which is the one with lowest, for example, carbon footprint or water footprint. So it can be used for many different purposes. In general, it has these three perspectives: internal use for companies, communication, or for policy making.
And then, depending on your needs, you then choose approach for calculating life cycle assessment.
Exactly. Once you have identified what is your goal, you move to define the scope, which is usually referred as the system boundaries. What are the activities that I want to include? This is
can I
something.
choose?
Yeah, you can choose. Usually, ideally, when you do a life cycle assessment, you cover the whole life cycle of the product. This is the so-called cradle to grave approach. Yeah. But you can do life cycle assessment just for the manufacturing part,
really?
or including upstream activities. Or you can do a life cycle assessment. There are many life cycle assessment research focus only on end of life of products. What happens if I recycle the material, I incinerate it, or I dump it or something? So you can do it. It's not something very inflexible. You can do it as you wish. And in this regard, it's also similar to the greenhouse gas protocol. In the greenhouse gas protocol, you have scope 1, scope 2, and then in scope 3, you can choose, remember, the different categories. So in that sense, it's a little bit similar.
But then in that case, I cannot actually say that I'm taking into account full life cycle assessment. Then I'm taking into account one part of life cycle.
That's why when you do a life cycle assessment for communication purposes, it's always, let's say, if it is third-party verified or if it is really for communication purposes, you need to declare what are the system boundaries. Was a full life cycle assessment, or did you only cover upstream activities plus your manufacturing? So this type of information should be revealed transparently.
And which approach do the most companies choose?
It depends on the purpose. If, for example, if the purpose of doing a life cycle assessment is to create an environmental product declaration, which is a document that is third-party verified with your results of the LCA, you need to do full life cycle. Yeah, especially we're talking about construction products. You can skip maybe the use stage, the use of the building, but other than that, you need to include all the rest of the life cycle. For researching purposes, you choose. I'm interested in looking at the full life cycle, or maybe my research is only focused on recyclability, or my research is focused on different type of materials, virgin materials versus recycled materials. So I can focus on different stages of the value chain or life cycle. So it depends on the goal, actually. But the important thing is that if it is for communication purposes, these system boundaries are transparently communicated. Because, of course, you can imagine, you cannot compare the impact of a product when you did the full life cycle versus if you did only few steps in the value chain, right?
That's why I'm asking.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
That's why I'm asking. Can you mention maybe some example of how actually, let's say we have a glass of water, we want to measure the life cycle assessment for the glass just how does this process practically?
Okay, I will give you an example with construction product because it's a little bit easier. Okay. So imagine that you are a concrete company. You make concrete for buildings. So if you want to do a life cycle assessment, you define the goal and scope. So what is the life cycle assessment for? Is for making an EPD or is for internal purposes? So you define the system boundaries according to that goal. That's the first thing. So you sit with your expert on LCA, you define those things, you write them down, nothing special, you just need to write them down. So whenever you need to go back to, hey, what they decided, you can check it out, right? And then based on the stages in the life cycle that you decided to calculate, to incorporate in your study, you start to collect the inventory. And this is the second step in the life cycle assessment, inventory collection. And it's the hardest part, because then you need to go to your bill of materials. If going back to the example of the concrete, how much cement I am purchasing, how much, where are my suppliers located, who are my suppliers, how much gravel or different materials, sand, in order to produce the concrete. So I need to start to look for this information. This is where it gets messy, because it can be very time consuming and resource consuming.
Can you trust to that information? How can you check whether that information is correct? And what do you do when your partner do not calculate such kind of information that you need?
Usually when it comes to this type, I mean, if we are talking from a perspective of a consulting company doing the LCA, usually as the producer of the material, you want to bring someone that is not only good at LCA, but also knows your product. So this person is able to understand if something is missing, if you are skipping something, right? So if you are a chemical engineer expert on plastics, you are a little bit better qualified to do LCA than some other LCA practitioner that is focused only on concrete, because you know better how the production process looks like. On top of that, you have the verification step. If the LCA is going to be used for external communication, it should be third-party verified. And then verifiers, they ask for those, for example, bill of material. Show me your bill of material so I can actually check that what you reported in your inventory matches your bill of material. Show me your bills of electricity so I can check, I can compare, and I can check. This is in a nutshell how it works. But it is also important to tell that it's a very trust-based process, because verifiers cannot verify absolutely everything. So we trust a lot the companies are telling the truth.
So, but that's only in the case if I want to, after the LCA assessment, I do the EPD, which is like a logical next step if you have gone
If you want an EPD, not necessarily,
How long does it take to make a life cycle assessment?
The most time-consuming part is this inventory collection. I have seen, in my experience, I have seen companies doing inventory collection as fast as 3 weeks, and I have experienced companies taking up to a year to collect the inventory. So it actually depends. If companies have already in place these quality control systems or systems like SAP for procuring, then it's easier if everything is tracked properly. If companies don't have in place this type of system, then they need to start manually looking for that information, and it can take several weeks. In general, in the LCA world, we say between 2 and 3 months to collect the data, because it's somehow like an average.
How many people are involved into that process, data collection process?
Usually the LCA practitioner is helping, although the people collecting the information is inside the company. There is usually a project manager or a person in charge of doing the data collection, and this person needs to reach a lot of people inside company, procurement, financial, production managers, like the engineers in the plants, to understand how much are they consumer of certain materials that go into the different products. So at the end, it's a lot of people involved in the process.
Do you have to make life cycle assessment every year, or you just do it once?
Depends on your goal and scope, remember? No, if you are using LCA for internal purposes, for improving your products, this is called somehow eco-design or part of eco-design. You might want to do it every 3 months. Maybe you did a change, and then you want to revisit how.
Like you switch supplier, or
exactly,
you
switch a supplier,
resources.
you change your material. And this is why we say that life cycle assessment is an iterative process. You change something and then you rerun your model. Usually we use software to do life cycle assessment. So
like what? Like which software?
There are many softwares. There are desktop-based softwares, there are cloud-based softwares, there are some software that promise to do life cycle automation. There are many softwares in place. The most common one, commercial, is CIMA Pro. It's an international software. Many universities use it. There's another one called Gavi. Okay, it's not called Gavi anymore. They changed the name, but whatever. It is from a company called Sphera that is very famous in the sustainability world. And there are many more emerging LCA softwares. There are software that are for free. This software that I mentioned before, you need to pay an annual subscription. But there are software that are for free, like OpenLCA.
Do you recommend companies to test those startup software solutions? Because I'm approached like once per month with a new software solution for LCA calculation.
Are you? Really?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
You see? And sometimes it's very tricky to evaluate whether it's really valid.
You need an LCA expert for that to evaluate if the software is good or not. I have been approached. I have taken a look at a couple of them. Each LCA software looks different. The user interface is different. I appreciate this effort of making LCA softwares more user-friendly, because the common ones that I mentioned, they are really not user-friendly. You need a person who have studied a couple of years to be able to navigate those softwares. And I guess that's the reason why more softwares are emerging, because they detected there was this additional complexity that you don't need. It's a matter of user interface. Yeah.
Would you describe the process of calculating LCA like an easy one, or it's something that you really need an expert to do? Whether there are like in a GAG calculation, you follow the protocol, and if you know the Excel, if you really read line by line, and there are standards, and you can do it like any quality manager. How about the LCA?
This is a great question. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
LCA can be very simple, just as you mentioned. Anyone who goes to the GSG protocol can, in theory, do the GSG calculation. It's not rocket science. LCA is somehow similar. If you think about it, GSG calculation, you collect the inventory as well. You find those emission factors for those materials and electricity and fuel, and then you do multiplication, right, in Excel, and then you have your numbers. LCA somehow is similar. You collect your inventory, you find materials, energy consumption, etc., and then you match those materials to certain, not emission factors, but data sets in these LCA softwares and databases.
So you search for some kind of databases where you can get those numbers.
Yeah, for example, electricity in Latvia, I'm using this much. So I need to go to my LCA software and look for that process, electricity in Latvia. And then I use that electricity. And let's say, to make it very simple, that data set contains the emission factor. Yeah. Instead of using emission factors in LCA software, you use those data sets. And in a nutshell, the data set will give you that conversion, to make it very simple. So in theory, it's simple. You just need to learn how to use the software and you have some results. The problem is, and then you might wonder, then why do I need an LCA practitioner, an LCA expert? If it is that simple, all I need is to get a software that is user-friendly and poof, done. And this is actually something that concerns me, because new software developers are selling the idea that doing LCA is just that is as simple as that. In reality, it is not. Because there are different LCA frameworks. There is a basic standard, which is or couple of basic standards, the ISO 14040 and 14044. But then there are many other different standards for different products. If you want to go on to do an LCA for construction products and an EPD, then you need to follow a specific standard. And therefore you need to kind of be very careful on matching that inventory to data sets. If you want to do an LCA for in the United States, in order to, that in the United States they have this Inflation Reduction Act, and there is a lot of money coming for companies to invest in renewable energies and new technologies. In order for companies to apply to those fundings, they need to do LCA, and they need to prove that the results are lower. And there is a specific methodology on how to do that LCA. So it's not just go and link a material to a data set. You need to know exactly what you are doing, because there are so many nuances. Yeah. To give you an example, imagine you are using a recycled material, and then you go and you think it is as simple as find my material in an LCA database, and you just match it to the closest by name, And this is what some softwares are doing. And they are saying, oh, it's very simple. It's automated because you just match it and that's it. But imagine that the data set in that database, although the name of the material is the same, the data set in the software belongs to a virgin material, not to a recycled material.
Okay.
Then your environmental impact will be different. And there are so many nuances like this that, yes, you can do it. It's very simple, but the number that you are going to get is not representative for your process. And this is where the LCA practitioner is important in order to recognize those nuances and eventually even customize those data sets. But for someone to customize an already existing data set, it has to be an expert. You need to keep in mind certain engineering things like energy balance, mass balance, and then you need to know how to navigate these databases and what are the things you need to change if you want to customize a data set in order to be closer to the geographical and technological representativeness of your product.
So it means that actually, as a CEO of the company which decides to start to make the LCA, I cannot just say to my quality manager, please calculate the LCA for this particular thing.
Yeah, usually some companies are investing in having internal LCA practitioners, and some other companies cannot afford that, or maybe they can, but they don't need. Maybe you are a company that you just need an LCA once a year for communication purposes. Why I'm going to hire someone 24/7, right? So that's when you go to consultants, or that's when you go to these new emerging LCA softwares. The problem is, again, many companies are offering this LCA software promising that it will be extremely simple because it's just matching this and that, and you will have your results in a minute. And that is true. But if you want the results to be meaningful, you need to do a little bit more. And what happens is that some companies go for the software. They think it's going to be extremely easy. And at the end, they end up anyways hiring a consultant to help.
If I'm hiring a consultant, what kind of traits or education or whatever I need to look for at that company and consultant? Because it's like in, the joke recently in the LinkedIn with sustainability experts, they are like a mushrooms after the rain.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's hard to tell. In my case, as I mentioned before, I come from academic. So I have studied LCA and research on LCA for 6 years. But not all LCA practitioners come like that. Some LCA practitioners happen to be in a company that jump into LCA and then they did some courses and they can be very good as well. Yeah. The important thing is that the person has experience or it belongs to a company that you can trust. Or, for example, you can check that the person has had some academic background, like it is my case. Plus, I also have been working with companies, not only the academic background, but for 3 years already doing EPDs and doing consulting for other type of LCA things. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell because here in Europe, we don't have like a standardized or a diploma in LCA. On the contrary, in the United States, they have. I remember recently I found out, I honestly didn't know. A few months ago, I found out that in the USA, they have this kind of LCA organization or something, and then you can get accredited under that organization by presenting an exam. And then a lot of LCA practitioners in United States are putting up that from, I am a certified LCA practitioner. Here in Europe, we don't have that.
So if I have done the calculation, what do I get at the end? Is it one number?
Many numbers.
Many numbers. Okay.
Yeah.
And then as a CEO of the company who says, hey, sustainability manager, come sit with me.
Yeah.
We need to talk. What exactly I'm looking at?
Yeah. Well, if you did an LCA for many environmental impact categories, what you will have is a number, the same as you have a carbon footprint, X kilograms of CO2 equivalent per unit of process.
Yeah.
Or 1 ton of your product, or 1 kilogram, or 1 cubic meter, whatever. You will have similar numbers for those impact categories. If we talk about water footprint, you will have X amount of cubic meters of water. If you have Land use, you will have something like X amount of square meters of land use. If you are analyzing biodiversity, impact on biodiversity, you will have a unit that usually is referred as, it's a very complex unit, but I love it. There is a partially disappearing fraction of a species in a square meter per year.
Oh my God.
It's crazy, this unit. But when you think about it, it's a powerful unit. I'm actually kind of calculating how many species are disappearing in an area because I did something, because I conducted an activity. So these are the type of numbers that you're going to get in an LCA. What can you do with those numbers? Again, it depends on the goal. If my goal is to improve my internal processes, then I can start looking at my inventory. For example, if my carbon footprint is mainly triggered by the use of fossil fuels, then okay, easy. I try to replace those fossil fuels either by lower emission factor fossil fuel or by renewables. Yeah? If I am worried about biodiversity and this number in biodiversity is high, then I need to understand what is triggering that biodiversity. The beauty of the LCA software is that they will show you where the impact is coming. So you can track the material or the energy flow that is causing that impact. So you can then make the right decision. And this is why LCA is so powerful, because you can actually tackle the root cause. In many cases, it's obvious. Okay, if I'm a company, I'm utilizing electricity from a coal power plant, I can it's intuitive, that most of my carbon footprint is going to come from there. But when you go to other environmental impact categories, it's not so clear. Where is my impact on human health coming in my process? I have no idea. From the electricity use, from some material, from land use, I don't know. And LCA gives you the possibility to analyze, to get out of that carbon vision tunnel.
So it means actually it's a very good basis for also business decision analysis.
Yes,
where do we
totally.
want to proceed, or whether we need to cut some kind of things and processes and expenses.
Yes.
And this is something that you need to, together with the financial analysis, also look for the LCA analysis.
Yes, exactly. And this is why in the construction sector, EPDs are used for green procurement.
Yeah.
And now in many countries around the world, there start to arrive to come up by local regulation, these caps on the carbon footprint of new buildings. For example, in Finland, I think it's in Denmark, there is a cap. If you have a new building of more than 10,000 square meters, the carbon footprint per square meter cannot be more than 12 kilograms of CO2. And I think from next year, the limit is going to be dropped to 7.5.
Wow.
So what constructors need to do is collect the EPDs from all those materials that go into the building, sum them up, and divide by the surface area and calculate that value. So global warming potential in construction materials, or so-called carbon footprint, is becoming a decision factor, because I need to cut not only costs, but also I need to be sure to meet this carbon footprint regulation. And therefore, if some products are very high on carbon footprint, I might need to buy the next one that it gives me better environmental impact result, even if maybe the cost is a little bit higher. But it doesn't necessarily has to be like that. Sometimes a product can be the same price or cheaper.
From your experience, have you ever experienced the moment when the company says, "Oh, we had no idea"?
Yeah, of course, it happens a lot. We joke about that when you deliver results to the companies and wait a second, what is this number? Yes.
What have we done all the time?
Exactly. Especially if a company has never done the exercise of calculating at least greenhouse gases, then it can be shocking. Maybe for some reason they had idea that the number was going to be 500 and you give them 700 and they are, no, but wait a second. So again, LCA is iterative. What you do when you find this situation as an LCA practitioner is you tell them, don't worry, let's check. Let's check what are those flows. Remember I told you those materials or energy flows or emissions that are creating this high number. And then let's revisit the inventory. Maybe we overestimated the electricity consumption. Maybe we overestimated a material. It happens sometimes that the company gives you X amount of material for the year under study. But it turned out that they reported the material that they purchased, not the material they use. And there was a stock. So you actually do not use the amount purchased, but the amount used. So LCA is iterative. You go back and you try to fix the model. It doesn't mean that you are going to cheat. It means that you review, you double and triple check your inventory, you double and triple check those data sets that I mentioned to see if there is some improvement to do in those data sets, if you can customize to make it more accurate to the technology and geography of your process. And then you rerun the model. And then you start kind of coming to this final number that you will eventually report or use for whatever purpose.
So actually this means that there is a room for an error.
Yes, of course.
And if you do it every year, then you just, by also practicing, you understand how to gather data more accurate way.
Yes.
And the number can change all the time, even if you haven't changed anything in the business model.
Yes, exactly. We are all humans and we all do mistakes. People collecting the inventory, they make mistakes. Me building the LCA model, I can make mistakes. Honestly, what I do in many cases when I'm working, building a model, is I call my colleagues, hey, do you mind sitting half an hour with me and we check the model to make sure that I didn't miss anything? Because there are so many data points. When I do an LCA for cement products, for example, we have around 2,500 data points.
Oh my God.
So you can imagine the room
I
for
can
error.
imagine. It's
right?
like doing it to the ESRS reports.
It's crazy. The amount of data is crazy.
Yeah.
So, of course, there are room for errors because you need to input the numbers, etc. There are ways to reduce the error. You can parameterize and link LCA software to builds of materials already in Excel, in Excel, so you don't have to manually input the data. So there are these ways to reduce the error, but still, there is always. I haven't, honestly, in my 7 years doing LCA, I haven't. It has never happened to me that I do the model, I run it, and then it's perfect. I always have to go back and fix something.
And how did you get those errors?
By checking the numbers. By checking the numbers. Double checking the numbers, inviting some colleagues or some friends to check with me. Especially, you get good at LCA, especially when you are focused on a sector. This is why LCA is becoming kind of a niche. You have experts on battery materials, you have experts on concrete and cement, you have experts on the food sector. Because when you know already the process, you are able to smell the mistakes, right? Like, wait a second, there is something weird with this number. I remember I did 10 LCAs for similar products and the number was 10. Why here in this case is 30? Let's check where it's coming from. And then you start to spot this type of thing. And again, this is why, you need an LCA expert to do those LCAs. You can get the numbers, yeah. How good are gonna be those numbers if you do it by yourself without an LCA practitioner? That's the big question, right?
If I'm a manufacturer and I, for example, cosmetic manufacturer, and I have more than 200 products, how can I decide on which product should I do the LCA? Yeah. Should I do it to all of them? Great
question. My advice is always do the LCA for the product that you sell the most, because that's your representative product, right? If 70% of your revenue is coming from one product or 3 products, then focus on that, because that's what is material, actually, financially, but also from an environmental point of view. If you are selling 70% of that, it means that probably either your production volume is 70%, and even if not, in LCA we have this kind of philosophic way of seeing things. You might have manufacturing sites where you have a multi-output process like this, 200 different materials, and there is one flagship that you are producing, that your production volume is only 10%. That material is only 10% of your production volume, but 50% of the revenue is coming from that. That happens a lot of times. In LCA, we say, in that case, you need to instead of using production volumes, you need to take into account the economic revenue. Because if you think about it, your business is running on that product.
Yeah,
you are not running your business to produce the other products. You are running your business to produce mainly that one. So you need to allocate or consider most of the environmental impact is coming from that product, even if it is only 10%.
How do I get the data which is based in downstream and particularly in the use phase?
Yeah, that is also a very good question. In those cases, basically what you are doing is trying to define the environmental impact that will happen in the future, right?
Yeah, because I have to predict what my customer will do with my product.
Exactly. So in those cases, we create the so-called scenarios.
Scenarios, all right.
And then one scenario is I assume that my customer is going to do this and the end consumer is going to use it like this. This is typical, for example, if you think about washing machines. I don't know how many years a user is going to use a washing machine. 10 years, 5 years, 20 years. So you create the scenarios. What if it is used 5 years only and only 3 times a week? What if it's used 10 times a week? And you create those scenarios and you evaluate the environmental impact resulting from them. The same with the end of life. You know how much material is being recycled today, if we talk about steel or aluminum or paper or whatever. But you don't know what is going to be in 10 years, how much of that material is going to be recycled. Hopefully, we go into a circular world and circular economy, and most of the materials are recycled, but you don't know. So you need to try to create those scenarios and understand how is it going to be. If the LCA standard allows you to do that. Some LCA standards tell you you cannot assume scenarios. You need to use what is happening today.
So in that case, it means that if I calculate that LCA amount, which is kind of maybe a philosophical question, that as a company to stick with that LCA amount, which I have calculated, taking into account that scenario, I need to focus my marketing activities on educating my customer and end user to behave in the particular way as I have predicted in my scenario. So actually this shows you the way how you market your product, how you educate your customer.
There is a lot of work in education customers, in educating us and consumers. And this is somehow a shared responsibility, or at least is the way I see it, between companies and governments. We need to educate people. And also this is one of the cases where policymakers can use LCA. If you conduct an LCA and you realize that the best way is to dispose certain product, then in an ideal world, politicians should come together and should try to enable or create policies that enable that this product is disposed in that way, because it has been proven that is the way that create less of the impact.
Are there any industries or products that you cannot calculate LCA, or it doesn't make sense to calculate LCA?
I don't know. We say that in LCA you can do LCA for a product, for a process, for a service. So
really?
yes,
for services.
Yeah, we can do an LCA on a hotel operation, for example. And then you define, okay, instead of having a product like 1 ton of a product, my product is going to be, for example, 1 night of hosting 2 guests in a room. That would be my so-called functional unit or my product.
Okay, because I was thinking about that maybe for the services, it doesn't make actually sense.
No, it does. And actually, there is a lot of research on that. And in some LCA databases, you already find this type of processes. You can calculate the environmental impact of a night of a hotel.
Really?
Yeah.
And then you will take into account that amount when you calculate your Scope 3 emissions for the business travels.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is a good input for Scope 3 emissions for business travel, for example. Exactly.
The world gets more and more complicating during this conversation.
The way I see it is that we have more and more data that actually make things easier. If you think about it, before I needed to kind of estimate or guess what is going to be this number. With more data, we don't need to estimate or guess anymore. We have a certain kind of or a number that you can trust them more. At least is how I see it.
In that case, can we say that maybe in the future, as LCA takes more nuances into account, LCA can remove the GHG calculations?
No, not necessarily. With LCA, you can calculate, of course, as I mentioned before, carbon footprint or global warming potential. But the corporate world is already navigating in terms of scope 1, 2, and 3. And LCA navigates these topics in a different way. In LCA, you talk about the stages in the life cycle, upstream or raw material acquisition, transport, manufacturing, etc. Yeah. So in LCA, of course, you can also do it in terms of scope 2 and 3, but we don't do it in those. So I think the GSG protocol and other GSG accounting methods are going to stay. They are here to stay, and they are, of course. They're gonna be still used because companies like them, and people in the corporate world is already used to this. So I don't think they mutually exclude each other. Mm-hmm. You can have, and the beauty of it is that companies that already did GSG calculations, if you think about it, they already collected a lot of inventory.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if companies already did GSG, the way to the path to do an LCA is already paved, kinda.
And it's vice versa.
And vice versa, exactly. If you did already an LCA, the problem with LCA is that most times it's not a problem of LCA. The problem when you do LCAs in companies is that most of the time you do it for a product, right? But when you do GSG calculation, most of the time you do it at general level for the company.
True.
So
how company operates.
You could use data from LCA, from product LCA for your corporate calculations, but you will be missing data. On the other hand, if you already have all the data for your corporate accounting, the data that you need for the product LCA is there. It's there. So that is why LCA becomes easier for those companies that already did GSG, because the inventory part is already collected. You need to maybe aggregate it in a different way, organize it in a different way, but it's already there. And people who collected the data already knows what it means collect data.
You have such a great experience in a construction field calculating LCAs, but you choose for your dissertation to calculate LCA in food supply chain.
Yes.
Why?
Actually, the agricultural sector and the food industry came first. I happen to be working now in mainly doing environmental product declaration for the construction products. But when I started my PhD, I had the opportunity to work in a European sponsored project that it was about sustainability in food supply chains and energy efficiency in food industry. So I kind of latched to this European project to do my research, my PhD research. So yeah, I did my PhD research in sustainability of food supply chains. I focused on the gaps that exist, especially in Latvia, to assess that sustainability. And the results of my PhD in a nutshell is I propose a methodology to do sustainability assessment based on life cycle.
Can you tell me more about the gaps?
Yeah, the gaps are many. There are many products for which there is no LCA in place. There is also a big gap that the scientific community is trying to close right now, which is there is not a standardized methodology to calculate in a quantitative way sustainability. You cannot tell it today. You cannot tell if a product is sustainable, yes or not. Yeah. So there is that gap, but it's being closed, and it's being closed mainly by the use of life cycle assessment. Life cycle assessment is usually understood as environmental life cycle assessment. You calculate environmental results, but the same concept and methodology can be used to calculate economic performance. This is the so-called life cycle costing assessment, And you can also calculate social impact, social life cycle assessment. And it's the same concept. You look stage by stage in your value chain, and following a specific methodology that is already in place by the United Nations, you calculate social impacts. And social impacts can come in the way of performance or risk. You have certain performance in a social topic, or you are at risk in a certain topic. Instead of talking about carbon footprint, you talk about the performance in human rights, the performance in fair wages for your workers, the performance on impact on local communities, the performance in respecting indigenous rights, the performance on how safe is your product for the end consumer. So instead of having water footprint, carbon footprint, acidification potential, you have those other KPIs. When you put all those three things together, environmental LCA, life cycle cost, and social life cycle assessment, when you put them all, the three together, you have kind of a sustainability assessment. There is still a gap, and is the following. You need context. If today I tell you this product has a carbon footprint of 20 kilograms of CO2, the question is that a lot?
Exactly.
How much is that? I mean,
sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. 20 is not that much, right?
Exactly.
So we are lacking context on this evaluation, and the context is given by planetary boundaries and social thresholds, right? So we need to keep at least certain level of quality of life for our society.
Sounds like a donut economy concept.
Yes, exactly. It's the donut economy concept. So you need to put those numbers that LCA methodologies are giving you into
social context,
into that environmental context and social context. With environmental context, if we go again to carbon footprint, it means, if again to this example, 20 kilograms of CO2, is that the right amount for me to produce this product without transgressing the planetary boundary for climate change? Yes or not? What is the carbon budget that I can allocate to my different economic sectors? What is the carbon budget that I need to allocate to the construction sector? And then, based on that, how much can I build if each square meter of new building is releasing X amount of CO2? So I need to put those numbers in context. And only when I do that at financial, environmental, and social level, I can truly tell what is the sustainability performance of a system, of a product. And that is the gap that we have today, and researchers are trying to close.
And do you see that it can be closed within the foreseen future?
I think it's going to be closed the next decade.
Really?
Yeah, there are a lot of attempts now in transforming LCA results into planetary boundaries, and that's fascinating results. The thing is, you need to come into an agreement with different... this is a little bit of geopolitics, because you need to come into agreement with these budgets that I was telling you. How much are we going to assume that we can allocate? We have certain carbon budget per year that the planet and the carbon sinks of the planet can absorb, right? So that's my budget. How much I'm going to allocate to the food sector? The food sector is the second largest emitter after the construction sector. How much I'm going to allocate to my different economic activities? How much I'm going to allocate to the aviation sector? Maybe right now the aviation sector, I think, is 4% of our carbon emissions. That's quite high, considering that only 0.5% of the population is actually traveling by plane or less.
Well, it's been stated that the richest ones are the ones who has the biggest carbon footprint.
Exactly. So you need to start creating those budgets.
Yeah.
And the problem with this, as I see it, and this is maybe the main obstacle to come to this sustainability evaluation, is that you will need to face a hard truth. There is no room for everything. There are things that we're producing today that do not have room in a sustainable world. There are so many things that we use, produce, consume that we don't really need, that do not deliver value in terms of elevating our social conditions, or providing social equity, or things that simply create a lot of environmental impact and cannot be improved because we don't have the technologies to do. And that faces with a hard truth. we need to reduce production and consumption. And then we go into other topics that degrowth and things like that, of course, they are way more complex, I would say.
And so at the end of your dissertation, you provide the methodology for the companies.
I propose a methodology. I even built a tool for companies in the industry sector to evaluate the LCA, life cycle cost, and social life cycle assessment. Very simple tool. That's kind of the results of my dissertation. This tool for companies in the
Have companies already tried your tool?
There was a version of this tool published. It's public. It's available in the page of this European project I mentioned. It's called EPD with double C and double E.
Yeah.
There is a version of the tool. Unfortunately, it's not as powerful as the tool that I built inside for my PhD because there were some licensing costs. Mm-hmm. But the tool that is available inside of Riga Technical University, because I built it, I would say is quite powerful. Yeah. It's okay. It's not that bad.
So we can encourage the companies to contact you, to approach you, to test the tool and
Why not?
to provide?
One of my dreams is to eventually go further with this tool, and build and create this kind of carbon budgets and put things into context and create like a real product for evaluating sustainability in food supply chains. But that will require a lot of work, a lot of time and work, and I don't have the time right now, unfortunately.
Well, the time is the most precious resource nowadays. So you already did a very smooth transition to my next and actually the final question to you. So you already have almost PhD in your pocket. So what's your next big move?
Yeah. My next big move is to raise my little boy that was born 1 month ago.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh my God!
He's becoming 1 month old today.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Amazing.
So that's my big next goal in
That's
life.
a very big goal.
Yes.
Till next 12 years, definitely.
Mm-hmm. So that's my main priority, of course, right now. I am, as I mentioned before, I work with a company that we do EPDs for concrete and cement mainly. But I love research. That's honestly my passion. The time that I spent at the university made me realize that I really love research and sustainability, LCA. So my plan is to stay engaged. I have contacts, of course, in different universities in Europe, and I am participating in some research projects with LCA and sustainability. Maybe not super involved, not lead researcher, not lead author, but they're contributing a little bit. That's my plan.
And can you suggest for the listeners any topics or persons or brands or resources or news channels where we can follow and just to learn more about LCA and sustainability as itself?
Wow, that's a trick one. From a very academic perspective, I will say that people should stick to research papers and books, but no one really reads that. Let's be honest about it. So there are certain companies, I guess I can mention them if that's okay, that I like. They are consulting companies, but they really have very good material on LCA and sustainability. Companies like Sphera, if you go to their webpage, they are doing great things. They have good materials to learn about LCA and things like that. If you want me, I can provide you with some links so you can pause for LCA basics. Many people do not know, and many people think that there is this kind of gatekeeping on LCA that is very expensive. And it can be. Studying LCA can be expensive if you decide to go to university or something like that. But most of the standards are for free. The European Commission, they have a lot of LCA standards that are kind of, I would say, they are golden for learning LCA, and they are for free. I can give you those links and you can post them in your
That would be nice. That would be nice for our
Yeah.
community. So Thank you, Fabian, very much. I heard at least 5 more extra topics where I would like to invite you back to discuss, like social impact, which is my big theme, and also the cost of the life cycle assessment. So these are incredibly interesting topics. And thank you so much for guiding us through this life cycle assessment journey. And I hope, listeners, that you enjoyed and now you got more clarity about this very difficult topic, I would say.
Yeah, it's not rocket science, but you need to have someone that helps you navigate it for sure. So thank you so much for the invitation. I really love this. I was a little bit nervous, but I really love our conversation. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you.
Paldies, ka biji kopā ar mums. Klausies podkāstu Spotify un Apple podcasts platformās. Savukārt, ja tavam uzņēmumam ir nepieciešams palīdzēt noorientēties ilgtspējas jautājumos un izstrādāt ilgtspējas stratēģiju, sazināmies www.ziemeļmeita.com.